Hello, welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast, live on YouTube, X, and Facebook at this horrible hour. It's just gone 11:45. What an explosive evening it has been in the world of Newcastle United and Alexander Isak's desire to leave the club. Earlier this evening, we had Alexander Isak release a statement in which he talked of promises being broken and a lack of trust, essentially the trust not being there, and for the first time speaking on the record about wanting to leave Newcastle United. And then, just now, literally in the last 5 minutes or so, Newcastle United have released a statement in response to Alexander Isak. So we'll go back to the start. What time was it? 7:30, 8 o'clock, when Alexander Isak went onto Instagram and put out a statement which caught everyone by surprise, including the club. Here it is on the screen. You guys have no doubt seen it. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on it. I will read it, and then we'll dive into the club's response, which has just landed. Alexander Isak said, "I'm proud to be recognised by my fellow professionals with a place in the PFA Premier League Team of the Season for 2024-25. First and foremost, I want to thank my teammates and everyone at Newcastle United who has supported me along the way. I'm not at the ceremony tonight. With everything going on, it didn't feel right to be there. I kept quiet for a long time while others have spoken. That silence has allowed people to push their own version of events, even though they know it doesn't reflect what was really said and agreed behind closed doors. The reality is that promises were made and the club have known my position for a long time. To now act as if these issues are only emerging is misleading. When promises are broken and trust is lost, the relationship can't continue. That's where things are for me right now. Why change is in the best interests of everyone, not just myself." When this statement dropped, my first thought was, how will the club respond? Will they respond at all? Because on one hand, there are some strong accusations here from Alexander Isak. There is the speculation about what broken promises actually means in the context of this statement. On the other hand, if the club didn't or did respond, it would take the saga to a whole nother level and shut the door potentially, if it was a kind of a strong response, to Alexander Isak ever returning to Newcastle United, although he's made it 100% clear in this statement he doesn't want to. The club have responded in the last 5 minutes, as I've said, and it's quite a diplomatic response. I think people might have expected a bit of a stronger one, but the club have been diplomatic, as Eddie Howe has been throughout the entirety of this saga. He's always kept the door ajar for Alexander Isak to return to the squad. Newcastle have said, "We're disappointed to have been alerted to a social media post by Alexander Isak this evening. We are clear in response that Alex remains under contract and that no commitment has ever been made by a club official, and that Alex can leave Newcastle United this summer." So there we have it. Alex remains under contract and that no commitment has ever been made by a club official that Alex can leave Newcastle United this summer. We want to keep our best players, but we also understand players have their own wishes and we listen to their views. As explained to Alex and his representatives, we must always take into consideration the best interests of Newcastle United, the team and our supporters in all decisions, and we've been clear that the conditions of a sale this summer have not transpired. We do not foresee those conditions being met. This is a proud club with proud traditions, and we strive to retain our family feel. Alex remains part of our family, and we welcome back when he's ready to rejoin his teammates. So there we have it, ladies and gents. Newcastle have responded to Alexander Isak's statement earlier this evening. Wow. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. I mean, if we go back to Alexander Isak's statement, we have to question what this is. To me, this is one final attempt to push an exit. It's desperation. He's rolled the dice, and I think the dice goes off the table rather than rolling the six that he desires. Because the reality of the situation is that he has 3 years left on his deal. Newcastle United have not got a replacement for him and have actually, even before tonight, made it very clear they do not intend to sell Alexander Isak. and especially without a replacement. Their focus is on getting a replacement for Callum Wilson. Now, of course, kind of behind the scenes, they have looked to try and replace Alexander Isak. It's been very difficult, as the club have said in their statement. The third point, and it's a really important point, is that there's been no bid worthy of Isak's value. Now, Liverpool put in a bid of 110 million, maybe rising to 120 with add-ons. That is an insulting bid. It's well under his value, what he's worth. He is the best striker in the Premier League. He's one of the best in Europe. Liverpool buy Alexander Isak. There is no title race. It's done. It's dusted. Pay what he is worth. You know, if Liverpool are serious, then come to the table with a bid that gets the conversation started. At this present point in time, Liverpool have not done that. It was a silly bid, in my opinion. Now, Liverpool fans might say, how can you say a British record fee is silly? It's £40 million shy of what Newcastle have said they would consider potentially accepting. That's why it's silly. You've known the price all along, and you come in with a daft bid. This statement does not change anything. Alexander Isak's statement changes nothing. It just strengthens Newcastle's resolve. It just hardens their stance, really. We've seen that in reports from Craig Hope and Luke Edwards as well, and now the statement. I think that aside, the one thing it potentially does do is sour the relationship even further with the fan base, potentially beyond repair. And we've seen more flags tweet tonight, and we've seen a host of reaction from fans across social media. I don't think there's any way back, despite what the club have said there, for Alexander Isak and Newcastle United. I think they've been diplomatic because in many ways they have to. They can't come out and say, right, get out, simply because of the reasons I've just explained there. No serious bid, no replacement. But from the fans' point of view, and let me know if you're watching in the comments what you think, what does this statement do for your relationship with Alexander Isak? Me as a fan, I had already said there was no way back. My belief in that has only been accelerated. It's only been confirmed. There is no way back, in my opinion, as a fan. Of course, football is a fickle game, and there is always a way back, isn't there? And that is exactly why Eddie Howe and that statement from the club is as diplomatic as it has been, and why Eddie Howe on Friday in his press conference will be diplomatic, and why he has been so respectful over the last few weeks. But privately, you would have to wonder whether his patience and tendency to be nice has been tested, because that Alexander Isak statement is, again, very disrespectful, not only to the great fan base, but to Eddie Howe and to his teammates. He was already very disrespectful over the last couple of weeks by refusing to train, by not going on the tour to Asia. And this statement is taking it up another level. And we've seen the narrative from the players sort of change over the last few days with the post-match interviews at Aston Villa, and a lot of talk about unity and how this has been a problem, but they've come through stronger and better for it. And that narrative has started to change, as has the narrative across the national media as well. You know, very few national pundits are now on the side of Alexander Isak, and I don't think the statement tonight will change too many people's opinions on Alexander Isak, if I'm being honest. I think it's a gamble from him that will not pay off at all. And we talk about broken promises in this statement, and we do question what they were. The club, as I've mentioned there, have been pretty clear. He remains under contract, and no commitment has ever been made by a club official that Alex can leave Newcastle this summer. So Newcastle United refute the suggestion that Alexander Isak was told he could leave. The claim is Alexander Isak told them months ago, and then again at the end of the season. The club say that didn't happen, that no one said he could leave. And I have to say, you look at everything in terms of the reaction of Isak after that game against Everton. He was buzzing that Newcastle got in the Champions League. It didn't look like a man who wanted to leave. You look at the fact that even if he had told Newcastle he wanted to go, and Newcastle said, no, you won the contract, we want to keep you, you're staying. Are you telling me that his representatives wouldn't have been on the phone straight away to Liverpool or Real Madrid or whoever and said, look, we've told them what we want to do. They've said no, but put in a cheeky bid and see what happens. The bid didn't come in till what, mid-July? Doesn't add up to me. You know, if he told the club he wanted to go. If I was the agent, I would have then made them noises known straight away as soon as the window opened that this is what we want to do and to really push Newcastle's resolve. And it didn't happen straight away. And that, again, red flags for me. The other broken promise might refer to the supposed contract in which he was allegedly promised by Amanda Staveley to be done last summer. It didn't come. Paul Mitchell, again, reportedly said, having one. Personally, I think that was the right decision. Look, Alexander Isak is a great player. And in an ideal world, Newcastle United would be able to pay him £250,000 a week, £300,000 a week. But this is not an ideal world. Newcastle United are one of those teams which are in a stranglehold with PSR. And it is curtailing their ambition. It is curtailing what they are really able to do, along with the likes of Aston Villa and a couple of other sides. The reality of the situation is that Newcastle United couldn't afford to give Alexander Isak the pay rise that he arguably maybe deserved, probably wanted, for several reasons. The hit on PSR, it would have probably have meant a big name leaving. Secondly, it would have meant, I think, several other players then knocking on Eddie Howe's door and saying, if he's getting a pay rise, a substantial one, then I want one too. Tonali, Joe Linton, Gordon, Bruno, instrumental players to Newcastle United's success, looking at one player getting a massive pay rise and thinking, wait there, why aren't I getting the same reward? And again, the harsh reality is Newcastle would not have been able to afford that. And that would have led Newcastle having to sell a big star and then potentially having 3 or 4 other stars disgruntled because they feel that they're not getting rewarded like Isak was. So for me, as much as Paul Mitchell is getting a little bit of stick from some, I think it was the right decision because the long-term impact on the club would have been negative. At this moment in time, people will say, well, actually losing Isak, that impacts Newcastle's long-term strategy. Okay, you lose one player, but you still have a core of great players, Tonali, Gordon, Joe Linton, Bruno, who are happy and wanting to play for this club. I know what I would rather have. Sell that one player who feels unhappy, who wants to go, who's been maybe a little bit greedy, and keep that core and then spend that money in really investing in the squad in the years to come. But as it is, Newcastle, again, have made their intentions clear that they don't want to sell Alexander Isak. And as I said there, we do not foresee those conditions being met in terms of a sale this summer. So Alexander Isak has rolled the dice, and all I think he's done is angered you guys even more. I can't really see any positives from coming out of this statement, if I'm totally honest. I'm going to jump into the comments because there's quite a few of you guys watching, which is absolutely fantastic. Although I think the majority might be Liverpool. Let me go up into and find number one. Philip says it's midnight, getting some overtime, aren't you? Good on the club. Tony says, yep, he's read the club's statement. Geordie Dog says, trying to force a transfer request without the financial penalty of making a transfer request. We don't need him. That is the other thing. No transfer request has gone in. So, put the request in, Alex, if you're that serious about leaving. And look, we also talk about him being badly advised. We always say in these kind of circumstances that it's agent driven. That's what has been said about this. It must be the agent. It must be the agent. Alexander Isak is a grown man. And yes, he will have advisors who he pays to tell him what to do. And his agent will no doubt probably be leading that. I don't know for sure. We can only speculate. But he's a grown man. And at any point, he could have said, I don't think this is the best way to go about it. For instance, tonight, this statement, he could have turned around and said, is this really what we need to be doing? Can we not just get around the table and do this amicably? Because I think actually, had this been handled better, had this been handled amicably, he may well be a Liverpool player. Newcastle United, after all, have said that we listen to players' views. We understand, their wishes, and Eddie Howe's spoken about how short careers are. But Alexander Isak and his team have handled this so badly, and all it's going to do, as I've said, is harden Newcastle's stance. There could be a situation where actually, and it is looking more likely than ever, he stays at Newcastle. Liverpool don't come in with a bid. Even if they did, and they won't get accepted because Newcastle don't have that replacement. And Isak is made to train alone for the next 6 weeks, 2 months, And we have to hope that come October, November, he's realised he was wrong. He can be reintegrated into the squad. Hope we score a bucket load of goals and everything is forgiven. Although that right now seems a very, very far away possibility. And I'm not too sure that that can really ever happen. We can only live in hope about that. What else have you guys been saying? Peter says that post was definitely not written by Isak, clearly written by his agent. It's a defiant response from the club. Blockhead says, I don't care about him anymore. This is all about the club and only the club. Ian says this is a desperate plea under the advice from his agent. Shocking, really, as he said he's happy and liked the signing of Alanga. Well, yeah, a lot of people pointed that out. He was a big part of Alanga's signing for Newcastle United, obviously teammates for Sweden. And also he went to Austria and trained with the team and looked very happy there. And then we've come home and this is it. It's been quite a whirlwind and it's probably only going to drag on despite the quite hard words from Newcastle United. Jamie, though, says, I think the club statement could have been stronger. The club have just said they won't sell him to a Premier League team following his actions over the summer. That may well be the view of you, Jamie, and I no doubt a few others watching and listening, but I think the club have to be diplomatic in this and have to release a statement which allows all options on the table. And that last line about being a family club and Alex remaining part of the family and will be welcomed back when he's ready to rejoin his teammates is what I kind of expected from Newcastle United. They're not going to close the door simply because there is a strong possibility that he will not leave Newcastle United in the next week and a bit. You know, that is the reality of the situation. That is, if I was a bet man, where I'd be putting my money on. You know, I would like to see him sold and a replacement for him come in. That's what I would like. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't think it will happen. I think Newcastle will still try to push to do that. But the bottom line is, without a replacement, Liverpool need not put a bid in, really, because unless Newcastle have a replacement, it wouldn't get accepted anyway. So I think that's why the club have been a little bit diplomatic in that, because they understand actually the situation is probably going to be that Newcastle still have him on the books come September the 1st. Kerry says, I wish we could replace him tomorrow and let him go because he will never wear a black and white top again unless there was a big, massive apology from him to the squad and the fans. And if he refuses to play, we should refuse to pay him. Well, there is talk about a fine coming his way. Goalpost Vibes, who I am not sure who he supports, but says Newcastle are such a pathetic club. Thank you very much for that. There's another comment there from Stu saying they've had 10 players reject them already, which isn't strictly true. Newcastle have only been in for a few who have decided to go elsewhere. But thank you very much for that. Geordie Dog says the club statement is diplomatic. Let me see what else has been said. Barry says £130 million bid from Liverpool. Let him go. He's burned too many bridges now with Newcastle United. Seth says, doesn't this make the club look worse? The admitted conditions of the sale this summer have not transpired. Conditions were discussed and it wasn't blindsided the way it was portrayed in July. No, I don't think it does. I think that is in response to that news coming out last month that he wanted to go. I think claims that he told the club months ago, I find that hard to believe. I do, and the club wouldn't be sensible to lie about that, would they? Because that would leave them in a little bit of hot water. Peter says, do a swap deal for Isak to the continent, plus a replacement for Wilson, and Newcastle must sign 2 strikers. Neil says this is all down to PSR and the way other clubs like Manchester United and Chelsea can do what they like. Brothers can't is a joke and something needs to be done. Rich says £100 million and Ramos and PSG can take Isak. Dan says it's all gone very hectic with statements, etc. But the reality is I don't think anything has actually changed. Totally agree with you with that. Dan, again, I don't think anything has changed at all. Brian says, as much as he's messed us over, he helped us get our first trophy in a long time. So we'll always love that part of it. But I would take him back, he says, if he made a U-turn. A few Liverpool fans in the comments. Anthony makes a point about Liverpool here and says if they'd paid £150 million, they'd have him by now. They've lowballed Newcastle and want us to roll over. Good to see the club showing strength. And that is the other point. Newcastle United need to show how strong they are in this situation, because you let your star player go as soon as he kicks up a fuss, you let him go for less than he's really worth, and the market is mental at the moment, then that does set a precedent. So if they do sell Alexander Isak, and I know what they've said, but if they do, they have to make sure they get maximum value from him. They have to be really strong in this situation. And I think one side of that is getting £150 million from us, close to that. The other side of that is holding on to and saying he's not going anywhere. What you want to do is to show other stars in that team who potentially down the line, and fingers crossed this doesn't happen, but potentially in the next year, 18 months, think I've gone as far as I can at Newcastle and I want to leave. What you need to be showing now is that there are ways to go about it. And this way that Isak has chosen, this path that he's chosen, is not the way to go about it. You need to act responsibly and professionally. And if you do, we'll be amicable and we will respect and listen to your wishes, and you may get your move. But certainly, doing what Isak is doing is not going to get you what you want. And I think that is what Newcastle United need to be thinking about as well, and are thinking about with their response and their stance, that they are also setting the precedent to come. And this isn't the way to get a move now or in the future. Andrew says, love that my club is standing its ground. Let me just see what else we've got. Why Man says, couldn't be more proud of my football club tonight after that statement. A lot of Liverpool fans saying free Isak. Well, again, it comes back to the bid. If Liverpool are serious about Alexander Isak, come back with a proper bid. Not an insulting bid, not £40 million shy of what he's worth. Come back with a proper bid and test Newcastle's resolve. Otherwise, just walk away from it. Start giving him little bits of encouragement if that is indeed what has happened, and just let him realise his wrongs, that he's overplayed his hands, that it hasn't worked, and that his only choice is to apologise and come back into Newcastle United's squad. And look, goodness knows Newcastle United need a striker of his capabilities. He's absolutely superb. But is there a way back from him? That's the key question. What happens next? Your guess is as good as mine. This has been the Everything Is Back on my podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's such a late hour. It's just gone 10 past 12, but we felt we had to bring you this episode because it's been such a balmy night. But thank you very much for joining me. Do hit like on the video, do hit the thumbs up button, do hit subscribe, do get into the comments. Let me know your thoughts. You can email me at theaibwpodcast@reachplc.com. I'll be back in 10 hours time with John Gibson, no doubt talking about Isak as well as a host of other questions. We've had some sent in. If you want to ask John anything about the transfer window, anything about Newcastle, anything about Isak, do get in touch on social media or drop me an email. I'll put the best questions to John tomorrow morning. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you guys very soon.